Now that we are in the month of April, we are in the stretch run for what we would call the primary season in Idaho. No, we're not talking presidential primary. We're talking the primaries for local offices and people who are running at the state level and not the national level. Although, well, some of them are running for Congress. But no, the presidential primary is over with. But then we have another primary coming up, and that will be for races involving county commissioner, state legislative seats, as well as congressional seats. We're going to see a couple of those candidates this morning. Mary Bello, who is challenging Stephen Hartkin for his seat in a primary in the state legislature. She is scheduled to join us from District 24 coming up in about half an hour or so. She'll spend about 15 minutes with us outlining what her plans are, why she's doing this. And then just after 9 o'clock news, my friend Jack Johnson is coming in as well. That's not an endorsement, by the way. I'm not endorsing candidates in primaries. I just think the world of the guy, and he's a super stand-up guy. Jack is running for county commissioner, and that's not to say that his opponent is anything less than a super stand-up guy, but he'll spend about 15 minutes with us after the 9 o'clock news this morning as well. So you have an opportunity to hear these people, hear what they're thinking, what they're talking about, maybe even ask them a question or two. And we're also going to make an opportunity for their primary opponents to appear on the show with us as well in the coming weeks. So I hope that you can stick around for some of those things. I do want to mention, because it's getting a lot of attention, and we talked about it on the air the other day, no, it doesn't have any immediate impact on Idaho. California will in increments. You got to say this in increments because there's somebody out there right now. If I say California is raising its minimum wage to $15 an hour, someone will come up and say, you don't know what you're talking about. It's gradually going to go to $15 over the next few years in baby steps here and there and then everywhere. So we got to make that clear. We also have to make it clear Governor Jerry Brown in California has not yet signed that because he's traveling on the road, which means he's off to, I don't know, some Moonbeam Festival. That was one of his nicknames many, many years ago. But he is expected to come back and sign that bill into law tonight after he finishes whatever travels he happens to be on. He's probably in Colorado at some dope festival. I don't know. I'm just making an educated guess on that particular count. Originally, he had said he didn't want this. He's a liberal Democrat, of course, very liberal Democrat, but he had said that he didn't want this. And then the labor unions came forward and sat down with him, and they negotiated out a lot of different issues. And you may have heard if you were listening to Fox News at 8 o'clock. For instance, if a recession hits, they get to postpone the increases. But here's a few thoughts on how all of this is going to work out. Once it does take effect and California eventually reaches $15 an hour, if you're in Utah, Nevada, and Idaho and you're looking to poach California businesses, you're going to have a very easy time of doing that. And a lot of those companies that are already sick to death of doing business in California and are already coming to places like Idaho, Montana, coming to Utah, coming to Nevada, you'll be even seeing more of those. So in the long run, it'll be better for the job situation in our states. Number two, and I think this is why they're doing it in California, even though they know that that's ultimately what's going to happen, is because as a Democrat, you can turn around and you can blame those bad old corporations. You know, the man took your job away. Jerry Brown says, oh, but I raised the minimum wage for you. I'm a hero. And everyone in the labor movement and people working in those industries flipping hamburgers for $15 an hour will say, aha, the Democrats are wonderful. And they'll blame the people who actually pack up and leave the state for business reasons as being somehow, knuckle-dragging people who just don't care for the poor. And then there's a secondary aspect of this that will also help the Democrats out, the liberals in California. This is actually going to increase the hiring under the table of people for beneath the minimum wage. They already have a $10 minimum wage in California. My guess is, in a state where you have millions and millions of people who are there already illegally, a lot of those people are working under the table as it is, because businesses are looking to save money. So then those people feel beholden to the Democrat Party because the Democrat Party wants to erase the border and bring more of them in. So even though the Democrats know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that people are working under the table, it benefits Democrats again because they get to add all of these new voters to the rolls and say, hey, understand you've been working under the table. Gee, here's some food stamps. Here's a voucher for your housing. Here's a voucher for your cooling bills. Here's a voucher for clothes for your children. You see how this is going to work? Get on the gravy train and, just keep going along. And remember, vote Democrat come November, and we'll come around and pick you up just in case you forget. So now you've got the votes of the SEIU, and all of the people flipping hamburgers, and the labor unions, and the illegal aliens. The Democrats can't lose. Well, eventually, of course, they will, because when you bankrupt the state and you go to Washington, and eventually there are so many states going to Washington trying to beg, saying that we couldn't handle our own books, you've got to help us out, the whole system will collapse. But even then, Democrats look around and say, well, then we can usher in our socialist republic. Won't that be great? The deviousness of all of this is what really is amazing, and how well thought out their deviousness happens to be in all of this. And I'm telling you, this is the future that most of us are looking for around this country. Whether you like it or not, it's coming to a lot of other places, because once they drive the old system down, they're going to point the fingers and blame it all on capitalism. Even though the true form of capitalism that existed in this country in its earliest days or earliest forms hasn't existed in this country in 80-some years. 12 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. And if I could mention something that I think is also related to this, not only bringing illegal aliens here and registering them to vote, but I was reading the other day where Muslim organizations around the country, CARE and its affiliates, are trying to register as many Muslims as possible to vote for the Democrat Party this fall. That's why President Obama would like to bring even more Muslims to this country as quickly as possible so they can load them up on Election Day and they can eliminate the Republicans even more so. Now, I happen to see a story. Mainstream media tries to tell us that opposition, this is laughable. I saw a story that said that opposition to refugee resettlement in southern Idaho has passed. Really? That's news to me. Then the writer goes on to say, because we've already settled 300 new people here in Twin Falls. Well, hold on a moment. Just because we didn't go out and burn down their apartment buildings and beat them up in the streets and block the roads as they came in. See, because that's why liberals, that's what they really think you're like if you're a conservative. Because to them, liberalism is a self-evident truth, and the warm feeling they get all over by doing these things, which bankrupt the country, they can't understand why you don't get that same warm feeling. And so therefore, there must be something wrong with you, and their perception of you is that you're a violent person and you're going to go out and do whatever it takes by whatever means necessary to prevent these people from coming here. This is the MO that works on the left all of the time. So now they're saying, well, there's only a little political opposition left, but the public opposition. I got news for you. In 6 weeks, we're going to have a referendum here in this county. And these liberals are going to get their ears pinned back when it comes to that. Because, again, they sit around in their little circles and their knitting needles talking about how wonderful they all are, and they don't get out anywhere else. They live in their little bubbles. They have no idea what people in Murtaugh or people down in Filer or Buell or right here in Twin Falls really feel about all of this, because when you come over to scrub their toilets, they don't really spend a lot of time talking to you other than giving you a few orders, and then eventually tell you, well, you know what? We're going to hire a couple of these newcomers to do the toilet scrubbing anyway, and they'll do it under the table, so we don't need you any longer. And I came across this today, saw this on Facebook from Brigitte Gabriel, who's been a guest on our program. And she's been issuing warnings. No one will listen. She has experienced what happens when there's a tipping point that's reached with Islam in any country, because there's a little girl in Beirut. Her family was nearly killed, and they were chased off, and they had to leave and flee for their lives. You cannot see this, so I'll describe it. It's a photograph of a bunch of so-called refugees coming up a highway on their way into Europe. She writes, here is a photo showing some people walking to reach the final objective, to live in a European country. There are 7 men and 1 woman, that's singular. Now, they all can't be her husbands, because it doesn't work that way in Islam. Men take multiple wives. Women don't have that option. Women are supposed to sit there under their tents and take their usual beatings. Observing a bit closer, you will notice, somebody's going to say, that they're not all like that. And you know what? You're right. Only a few 100 million. Observing a bit closer, you will notice that the woman has bare feet, accompanied by 3 kids, and of the 3, she is carrying 2. Therein is the problem. None of the men are helping her, and all the men are wearing shoes, because in their culture the woman represents nothing. She is only good to be a slave to the men. Do you really believe that these particular men could integrate into our society, work and respect our customs and our traditions? I think that's a wonderful question to ask. 7 men, all healthy, big strapping fellows. Here's this poor woman in her bare feet. Terrible weather. It looks like rain and cold, the type of weather we have through most of January and February here. Barefooted, carrying 2 kids, and the men are standing there with their hands in their pockets. They'll make great welfare recipients. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, you get the feeling that living in a Muslim lifestyle under the Muslim rule of Islam is such a miserable existence that they resent every bit of it. And they spend their entire lives trying to break out, but they can't. And then they have to lash out at the rest of us because they just hate everything, hate each other, they hate us. And when you look at videos of Europe, it doesn't matter where in Western Europe or even the other parts of Europe, how they are just such uncivilized pigs. And you say to yourself, we cannot afford to take the chance to let these people in. I love people if they care and love America, but these people have no intentions of assimilating and caring about this country.
I've got a question for you. You do a lot of traveling in your business, and
yes.
and you've got liberal media now saying that the opposition to these people coming here has just faded away in Idaho. Do you get that notion with all the people you talk to as you travel?
Let me tell you something. Like I said, I deal with lots of business owners across this valley, and they're very concerned. And the only reason why this thing seems to have passed is because we're in the middle of election and Donald Trump and all this stuff, and everybody thinks it's all right. In the meantime, CSI and whoever else are continuing to import these refugees, and there is no vetting. Let me tell you something. When I have to show my ID to vote, and I've been voting there for 20 years, I say to myself, what the hell, man? But you know who I am, so I'm willing to do it. I tell you, no, this thing hasn't passed, and people are just distracted. It's been a heavy winter. Spring's coming. The free people of southern Idaho have work to do.
Well said. And, of course, the referendum, as I said, 6 weeks away. Thank you much for the telephone call. We've got a short break coming up. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Mary Bello, a challenger in District 24 for the state legislature in Idaho, challenging Stephen Hartgen. She's going to be coming along in about 20 minutes on the program with us. She'll spend about 15 minutes outlining why she's running. I think we could say, just by some of her associates, that she is also opposed to this program as well, but we'll let her say that herself. 47 right now, 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online anywhere all over the world at newsradio1310.com. We're talking about how, in the previous segment, how government will just simply address issues related to the minimum wage and people working illegally under the table. They'll throw them more benefits. You've got liberals out there who act as if the well will never run dry. Well, they'll just take it from someone else. They figure that there's always going to be someone else you can take this from. Got a quick story on how this is impacting certain industries around the country. Some relatively close to us now, and they'll start to feel it in far worse ways in just a matter of months. I do want to tell you, though, that Tint Lady has moved to a new location. 127 Filer Avenue. You're going to see that near the corner of Washington and Filer here in Twin Falls. And Tint Lady can come out and do a free estimate for putting tints in your home, your automobile, or your office. Window tints that will help reduce that heat convection this summer, which means your AC won't be running as much, which means you'll save on your electric bill, and eventually the tints will pay for themselves. You can call and schedule an estimate, or an appointment rather, at 736-8469, or go online at tintlady.idaho.com, a business now in operation nearly a quarter century locally. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only, and closed on Sundays. And remember, don't squint, get tint. I believe we have a telephone caller with us. It's coming up on 825. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 47, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Well, another way that they're going to bring in more low pay refugee migrant type people is this Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's 5,554 pages. It's being sold as a free trade agreement, but only 5 out of the 29 chapters actually have to do with trade. The other 24 have to do with political and economic merger, and part of that merger is they're going to open up the borders and allow more cheap labor in here. And that's something people need to be aware of. Our senators are close to being be voting on this sometime in the future. Nobody knows for sure when, but it could be called up for a vote anytime. So we need to be vigilant that this thing is really bad news, but it fits right into the plan to destroy this country, make us a third world country again.
Somebody's going to profit somewhere, and I thank you much for chiming in on that, too, as well. 47 right now at 8:26. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. The jobs report came out today, and of course, the Democrats were running around saying, oh, an unexpected 215,000 jobs were created. Well, how many were actually lost? Because the unemployment rate ticked back up to 5%. Well, okay, 5%, people say, well, that's the best it's been in years. But again, they don't count people who are no longer getting unemployment benefits, which are tens of millions. And the labor force participation rate is abysmal. I mean, it's like 90 million people who aren't working, or in excess of that, who could be working, who are of working age. And I read somewhere a few years ago that we need actually 15 million jobs to replace all those jobs that were lost in the economic downturn in 2008, 2009. 15 million. So when you hear, well, we've added 250,000 jobs, at this pace, then we'll only need a century to return to where we were before that downturn. Wow, isn't that just a great thing? Meanwhile, the attack on people who actually produce things that we can use, such as cheap energy, continues. Washington Examiner says coal giants Peabody and Arch Coal made the announcements Thursday, beginning with their operations in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming. Up until now, eastern coal mines have been virtually immune to the big layoff scene in the western, that is. Coal mines have been immune to the big layoff scene in the eastern part of the country. The announcements mark a significant turn of events for the industry. Now, it says only 500 jobs are being lost in Wyoming. But we're not talking a state. Wyoming has a population of about 500,000 people. 500 jobs that pay really well in that part of the state. Tell you what, going to be very different. But tell you what, the government here doesn't care about your old pride and your refusal to take charity. Here's some food stamps. Here's some other goodies. We've got someone else who'll pay for that, and, you can just go home and put your feet up and rest. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. Bill, raising the minimum wages in California will force the food producers to raise prices so they can survive. Raising food prices will reduce demand, so they will need less workers. The consumers lose because of the high prices, and the workers are going to lose because there are going to be less jobs.
Well, you bring up a great point, and thank you for the call. I think that you go out to the Joaquin Valley, that is the Central Valley area, they feed most of the country and a big part of the world. Now, I don't know if farm labor is exempt from this. My guess is the push has been among liberals in California for years to create one system instead of having, farm labor paid in a different manner. And if you already think about what you pay for a bag of oranges when you go to the store, it's not bad, I suppose. I buy clementines mainly. They're easier to peel. But when you go there, you buy your groceries. How much higher would those groceries be if those people working out in the fields end up getting this same wage? Or if they at least get some incremental increase from above where they've been? Because in many states, farm wages differ greatly, obviously, than they do from there's some exemptions in there. But these people in California they're globalists, one-worlders. They're kooky enough to do all of these things, and they don't see any issue in that. Well, we'll just give you some food stamps if you can't afford it. Yeah, but that means all our taxes go up. Oh, don't worry, we've got other people we can tax. And they'll all just move out of the country when we do it, but still, it'll be wonderful for everybody. Bill Colley with you. In about 10 minutes, we're going to be joined by a candidate who's primarying a sitting state legislator this year. She'd like you to send her to Boise, and she says she's going to reform things there or do her best to do that. That's on the way at 8:40 this morning. Bill Colley with you at 8:30. It's 47 on newsradio1310.com and News Radio 1310 KLIX.